The freezing November rain beat against the windshield like a swarm of gravel. Inside the rusted sedan, the heater blew a thin, lukewarm breath that barely cleared the frost from the glass. My 5-year-old daughter, Lily, was asleep in the passenger seat, curled beneath my old corduroy jacket, her small fingers tightly clutching a tarnished silver music box that didn't play music anymore. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from the cold, but from the echoed roar of my father's voice still ringing in my ears, a sound that had just fractured my world into a million irreversible pieces. "Don't ever come back," he had roared, slamming the heavy oak door of the family homestead so hard the porch lights flickered out. Now the taillights of the cars ahead blurred into long, bleeding streaks of red on the dark highway. We had nowhere to go, no money left in my bank account, and the terrifying realization was settling into my chest. I had just lost the only safety net I ever knew, on the one night the world promised warmth and family. My name is Julian Vance. At 32, my life could be measured by the grease beneath my fingernails and the miles logged on a service truck. I am an industrial mechanic, a man who spends 10 hours a day fixing massive, broken assembly lines in cold manufacturing plants, only to come home to a small, rented duplex and try to fix a life that feels permanently stalled. My daily routine was a clockwork of survival. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., brew black coffee so strong it burned, pack Lily's lunchbox with precisely cut apple slices, and drive her to my aunt's house before my shift started. I am quiet, fiercely protective, and stubborn to a fault. My greatest emotional wound wasn't the poverty, it was the sudden, quiet departure of my wife, Clara, 3 years ago. She hadn't left for another man, she had simply packed a single suitcase, looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "I can't breathe in this town anymore, Julian. And I can't carry your family's weight." My biggest fear was that Lily would look at me one day with those same hollow eyes and realize her father wasn't enough to keep her safe. Yet beneath the exhaustion, I held onto a quiet, fragile dream, to buy a small piece of land out west, away from the suffocating judgment of the Vance name, and build a workshop where I could restore old, discarded things. I valued loyalty above all else, a trait that had unfortunately kept me tethered to a family that viewed me as an outcast. The town of Blackwood was a place built on old timber money and older grudges. The Vances had owned the local mill for 3 generations, a legacy maintained by my father, Arthur Vance, with an iron fist and a total absence of grace. Growing up, our house was less of a home and more of a corporate headquarters, where affection was a transaction and failure was an unpardonable sin. My brother Thomas had followed the script perfectly, Wharton degree, a flawless wife from a prominent family, and a seat at the right hand of my father's desk. I, however, had chosen a wrench over a briefcase, and worse, I had married a girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Our family holidays weren't celebrations, they were performance reviews. Every Thanksgiving, the extended family gathered at the estate on Elm Lane, dressed in tailored wool and pearls, to pass around heavy silver platters of turkey and quiet, devastating insults disguised as polite conversation. I usually sat near the end of the long mahogany table, keeping my head down, focusing on cutting Lily's food into tiny, manageable bites. Lily was a quiet child, observant beyond her years, who communicated mostly through small, gentle gestures, a tug on my sleeve, a soft pat on my hand. She didn't speak much, a trait the family attributed to a lack of discipline, but I knew it was because she was constantly reading the room, searching for the hidden traps my family loved to set. The dynamic shifted drastically 3 months before that fateful Thanksgiving when Marcus arrived in town. Marcus was an older man, a retired master clockmaker who had rented a small, dilapidated storefront next to the auto shop where I frequently ordered parts. He was a man of silver hair, deep-set wrinkles that seemed earned through laughter rather than worry, and eyes that held a sharp, penetrating intelligence. Our first interaction was entirely accidental. I was sitting on the curb during my lunch break, trying to fix a jammed zipper on Lily's school backpack with a pair of needle-nose pliers, when a shadow fell over me. "You're forcing it," a deep, resonant voice said. I looked up, annoyed, ready to tell him to mind his business. Marcus didn't look away. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small vial of specialized oil and handed it to me. A single drop on the third tooth. Let gravity do the work, young man. I hesitated, then took the vial. I applied the oil and the zipper slid open smoothly. I tried to hand the vial back, but he waved his hand dismissively. Keep it. A man who tries to fix his daughter's bag with industrial pliers needs all the help he can get. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a steady, quiet fixture in my life. He didn't ask about my family, and he didn't judge my all-stained clothes. Instead, he invited me into his workshop, a place filled with the hypnotic, rhythmic ticking of 100 ancient clocks. It was there that Lily found the silver music box. It was sitting on a back shelf, covered in dust, its lid scratched and its internal gears frozen by decades of neglect. When Lily picked it up, her small fingers tracing the faded engravings of wild roses on the lid, Marcus didn't snap at her to put it down. He simply knelt to her eye level and smiled. That one has a stubborn heart, little one. It refuses to sing for just anyone. Lily looked at him, then at me, and for the first time in months she smiled a genuine, bright smile. From that afternoon on, Marcus became our sanctuary. While I helped him lift heavy grandfather clock casings or repair stripped brass gears, he taught Lily how to listen to the quiet language of machinery. Every mechanism has a pulse, Julian, Marcus told me one evening as we shared a thermos of cheap coffee. If you force it, it breaks. If you understand its weight, it yields. I wish people worked that way, I muttered, staring at my hands. Marcus looked at me deeply, his expression unreadable. They do. But sometimes the gears have been rusted by so much pain, they require an entirely different kind of pressure to move. The tension in my life, however, was a coiled spring waiting to snap. The first true emotional question arose a week before Thanksgiving. I had received an urgent, certified letter from the bank stating that the mortgage on my small duplex had been bought out by a private holding firm, and my rent was being tripled effective immediately. When I investigated the name of the holding firm, the tracks led directly back to Vance Enterprises. Why was my father trying to price me out of my own home? I hadn't asked him for a dime in 10 years. I had worked hard, paid my bills, and kept Lily away from his toxic influence as much as possible. Why now? When I confronted my brother Thomas outside the mill, he wouldn't look me in the eye. He merely adjusted his gold watch and said, "Father thinks it's time you grew up, Julian. You're embarrassing the family name living like a vagrant on the east side. He's offering you a position in logistics at the mill, but it comes with conditions. You move back to the estate and you let a proper nanny raise Lily. Father says her silence is a bad reflection on our lineage." A cold fury had washed over me. "Tell father to go to hell," I whispered. "He expected you'd say that," Thomas replied, his voice chillingly detached. "Just remember, Julian, Thanksgiving is next week. Father expects a decision by dessert." The night of Thanksgiving was unseasonably dark, the air thick with the scent of impending snow. I had resolved not to go, but my aunt, the only person who had shown me an ounce of kindness after my mother passed away, begged me to attend. "For peace, Julian," she had pleaded over the phone. "Just show your face, don't let him win by default." So I dressed Lily in her best velvet dress, one that was slightly too short but meticulously clean, and we drove to the estate. The dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare. My father sat at the head of the table like a king inspecting his subjects. Every time Lily reached for a roll or dropped her fork, a heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. The first major emotional reversal occurred halfway through the meal. My father raised his crystal glass, signaling for silence. "I have an announcement," Arthur Vance said, his voice cutting through the clinking of silverware. "As many of you know, Vance Enterprises is expanding into the logistics sector. To ensure our legacy remains secure, I am naming Thomas as the sole heir to the estate and the majority shareholder of the company." The room erupted into polite applause. I kept my eyes on my plate, entirely unsurprised. But then my father turned his gaze directly toward me. "As for Julian," my father continued, his smile completely devoid of warmth, "I am giving him a final opportunity to redeem his failures. I have purchased his debt. I own his home." If he signs over legal guardianship of Lily to Thomas and his wife for the next 5 years, to ensure she receives proper medical and social structure, I will wipe his slate clean and give him a manager's salary. The room went dead silent. My aunt gasped. I felt the blood rush to my ears, a roaring sound like a jet engine. I looked at Thomas, expecting to see triumph, but to my utter shock, my brother looked absolutely terrified. He was pale, his hands trembling as he gripped his napkin. He wasn't the architect of this cruelty, he was a hostage to it. He didn't want my daughter, he was terrified of what our father would do to him if he refused. No, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. Arthur Vance's eyes narrowed into slits. What did you say? I said no. I stood up, pulling Lily's chair back. You can take the house, you can take every dime I don't have, but you will never, ever touch my daughter. My father stood up, his face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He slammed his fist down, shattering a porcelain gravy boat. Then you are nothing to this family, you are a parasite, get out of my house, take that broken child and get out. And don't ever come back. That brought us to the highway, the freezing rain turning into heavy, blinding snow. Lily was still asleep, her small hand resting on the silver music box. I pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner, the neon sign buzzing weakly against the storm. I put the car in park, rested my forehead against the steering wheel, and finally let the tears fall. I had failed. I had no home, no money, and my family had completely discarded us. Suddenly, a soft knock on the driver's side window startled me. I looked up. Standing in the freezing snow, wearing a heavy canvas coat and a wool cap, was Marcus. I rolled down the window, stunned. Marcus. What are you doing here? I've been following your taillights since you left Elm Lane, he said, his breath pluming in the cold air. Unlock the door, Julian, it's freezing out here. I unlocked the doors and Marcus climbed into the back seat. He looked at Lily, who was just beginning to stir, then at me. His face wasn't filled with pity, it was filled with a fierce, quiet determination. Why are you here, Marcus? I asked, my voice cracking. How did you even know where I was? Because I know your father, Marcus said softly. The second major emotional reversal hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean you know my father? Marcus reached into his heavy coat pocket and pulled out an old, faded photograph. He handed it to me. In the photo, 2 young men stood in front of the Blackwood timber mill, their arms thrown around each other's shoulders, smiling broadly. One was a young, vibrant Arthur Vance. The other was Marcus. Arthur and I founded Vance Enterprises 40 years ago, Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of regrets. I was the engineer, he was the businessman, but as the money grew, Arthur's heart shrank. He wanted to squeeze out the workers, to maximize profits at the expense of human lives. When I opposed him, he used a legal loophole in our partnership agreement to strip me of my shares, my reputation, and my life's work. He ruined me, Julian. And I let him do it because I thought fighting him would destroy the town. I stared at the photograph, then at Marcus. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to see who you were first, Marcus said gently. I came back to this town 3 months ago to finish what we started, to take back what he stole. But when I met you, I realized something far more important. Arthur didn't just steal my company, he destroyed his own family. He turned his sons into instruments of his ego. Except for you. You broke the mold, Julian. The unexpected truth began to reshape everything I thought I knew. Marcus reached into his pocket once more and pulled out a small, intricate brass key. He didn't hand it to me. Instead, he reached forward and tapped the silver music box sitting in Lily's lap. Lily woke up fully then, her wide eyes reflecting the dim neon light of the diner. She looked at Marcus, then down at the music box. Go ahead, little one, Marcus whispered. Try the key. Lily took the brass key from Marcus's hand. With a steady, surprisingly confident motion, she inserted it into a hidden seam at the base of the music box, a detail I had never noticed despite staring at it for weeks. She turned the key 3 times. A crisp metallic click echoed through the car. The scratched silver lid popped open. There was no music. Instead, tucked tightly inside the velvet-lined compartment was a pristine, legally stamped document. It was a certified copy of the original partnership agreement of Vance Enterprises. bearing a critical, unvoided clause. In the event of an unethical hostile takeover or forced dissolution of partnership, 51% of all voting shares automatically revert to the founding engineer or his designated legal proxy. Attached to the document was a recent legal filing dated just 2 days ago. Marcus had legally named me, Julian Vance, as his sole proxy and heir. "I don't understand," I stammered, the words catching in my throat. "Why me? I'm just a mechanic." "You're a man who knows how to fix things without breaking them," Marcus said, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Arthur thinks he owns you because he bought your debt, but this document proves that we own the mill, we own the land. We own the very chair he sits on. I didn't have the strength to fight him alone, Julian, but with you we can save this town, and we can save your brother." The final emotional reversal occurred 3 days later, on Monday morning. The snow had blanketed Blackwood in a deceptive, serene white. Inside the boardroom of Vance Enterprises, Arthur Vance sat at the head of the table, flanked by high-priced corporate lawyers and a visibly miserable Thomas. They were finalizing the paperwork to seize my duplex and finalize the logistics expansion. The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open. Arthur didn't look up immediately. "I told the secretary no interruptions," he snapped. "She didn't have a choice, Arthur," a voice called out. My father froze. He slowly lifted his head, his face turning an ash grey as his eyes landed on Marcus, who walked into the room with an undeniable authority. Behind Marcus walked me, dressed not in grease-stained coveralls, but in a clean, sharp suit, holding Lily's hand. "Marcus," Arthur whispered, his voice stripped of all its usual thunder. "You're dead. You left this town 20 years ago." "I came back to check on my investment," Marcus said calmly, placing the original partnership agreement on the polished mahogany table. "And to introduce you to your new majority shareholder." Arthur's eyes darted to me, then to the papers. He lunged forward, grabbing the document, his hands shaking violently as his lawyers scrambled to read over his shoulder. The lawyers' expressions instantly changed from corporate arrogance to absolute panic. "This is impossible," Arthur breathed, looking at me with a mixture of terror and burning hatred. You're nothing. I kicked you out. I told you to never come back." "And I didn't come back as your son, father," I said, my voice steady, completely devoid of the fear that had haunted me my entire life. "I came back as your boss." I turned my gaze to Thomas, who was staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. The fear in my brother's face was gone, replaced by something entirely new. "Hope." "Thomas," I said gently, "the logistics expansion is cancelled. The mill is going to stop squeezing the town, and we're going to start treating the workers like human beings. And your position as executive director is secure, if you want to work with me, not for him." Thomas looked at our father, who was slumped in his chair, suddenly looking like a very old, very defeated man. Then Thomas looked at me, a slow, genuine smile breaking across his face for the first time in our adult lives. He nodded once, a silent vow of solidarity. The climax of the story didn't happen in that boardroom, however. It happened later that evening, back at the small duplex. Marcus had used his legal authority to permanently dissolve the holding firm's debt, securing the property in my name forever. We sat in the living room, a fire crackling in the small hearth. The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a quiet, peaceful world. Lily sat on the rug by the fire, the silver music box open beside her. As I watched her, she reached into the velvet compartment one more time. Her small fingers felt a secondary catch, a tiny hidden spring at the very bottom of the box. She pressed it. A soft, mechanical whirring sound filled the room. The music box began to play. It wasn't a corporate anthem or a complex classical piece. It was a beautiful, hauntingly familiar lullaby, the exact song my mother used to hum to me when I was a frightened little boy hiding from my father's temper in the upstairs closet. I choked back a sob, realizing the final, beautiful truth. My mother hadn't known Marcus, but she had bought this music box from his shop decades ago, before it fell into disrepair. Marcus had recognized it the moment Lily brought it to his counter. He had spent weeks secretly repairing the internal comb and the gear train, matching the melody to the old repair records he kept from my mother's visit 30 years prior. Marcus looked at me from the armchair, a gentle smile on his face. I told you, Julian. Every mechanism has a pulse. Sometimes it just takes the right people to make it sing again. Lily stood up, holding the playing music box in both hands. She walked over to me, climbed onto my lap and wrapped her small arms around my neck. For the first time in 3 years, she spoke. Her voice was small, clear, and filled with an absolute certainty that healed every broken corner of my soul. "We're home, Daddy," she whispered. I held her tight, buried my face in her hair, and listened to the music fill the warm room. We had been discarded, rejected, and told to never come back. But we hadn't just survived, we had found our true destination. We had found a family built on love, justice, and the beautiful, unbreakable bonds of the people who refuse to let each other break. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable cinematic narratives, and share it with someone who needs a reminder today that even when the world closes its doors on you, a better one is waiting to be built.